At Poncheros, we're so obsessed with flavor, we mix our ingredients. And we're so obsessed with mixing our ingredients, we invented our own mixing tool. Every ingredient in every bite. Poncheros, come build your better.
This is the Bulk Report.
Tonight, what has gone wrong with Anthony Albanese? Or was he never up to the job? A former top Labor staffer tells about the man he knows and worked with. The man that voters didn't know until now. Don't miss it. Plus, Melbourne's school strike for Palestine. But who were all the adults there? And why did it turn into such a hate fest against Israel? Plus, is the government's border policy falling apart? A boat from Indonesia lands a dozen people on our coast. And tonight, also a huge victory in Holland that will shake Europe. Victory for a politician who's promised to stop all Islamic immigration. Meanwhile here, our government defends its decision to bring in 860 Palestinians with even sillier excuses.
Just as not everybody from Afghanistan is linked with the Taliban, not everybody who is Palestinian is a member of a terrorist organisation.
I'll fact check that nonsense for you later. And a warning, if you're having dinner, you might want to look away, because coming up is Barnaby Joyce and the massive rat plague in Queensland that has the coast littered with these dead rodents. But first, shocking news today. This country is now at a critical tipping point because the Albanese government is worse than Whitlam and is now desperate with your money. It's finally seeing what I've warned since the day it was elected. Its green energy revolution, renewables everywhere, is a total failure and now faces total collapse. Much higher prices for our electricity, but more blackouts. The problem today, the madness, is that instead of admitting this and pulling back, Energy and Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen has announced he's going to go double or nothing. In fact, 500% harder with your money. He'll spend a lot more of it. But just how much? He won't tell you, because you'd probably be horrified. Now, I can't tell you how catastrophic this could be for jobs, for businesses, and for your power bills, because it was 3 weeks ago, of course, that Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he did first sound the alarm, warning that the government's plan to switch us to wind and solar power was actually heading over a cliff. All of its targets, you see, are shot.
We will need to do even more to secure sufficient renewable energy generation, transmission and storage to meet our ambitions.
And 2 days ago, Chris Bowen agreed, but very grudgingly, and a euphemism, because this is all on him.
I'm pleased with the progress we've made so far, but far from satisfied.
Far from satisfied is a grotesque understatement. These are the government's promised targets for 2030. That's just 7 years from now. They were also mad at the time, and now the government sees they're hopeless. 82% of our electricity from wind and solar and other renewables. No expert I've heard now believes that's even remotely possible. The rollout is way behind. 43% emissions cuts, also behind. The target for electric cars, 89% of all new car sales by 2030. The government's transport department says they won't even get a third of that. And 10,000 kilometres of new transmission wires to hook up all those new wind and solar plants. Again, way behind, often 2 or 3 times over budget, and facing massive community opposition to having these monstrosities over the landscape. So it's chaos. In fact, just it was yesterday, another huge blow to the government's renewable energy scheme. It keeps having these disasters. Chris Bowen has been banking, for instance, on green hydrogen, made from water, very expensive, but a scheme touted by green billionaire Twiggy Forrest to cut our emissions.
That's green hydrogen, the purest source of energy in the world, and one that could replace up to 3/4 of global emissions.
In fact, Andrew Forrest has just canned a promised power plant in Port Kembla that he said would use green hydrogen and gas. One that the federal government actually gave $30 million to 2 years ago. There was a Morrison government then. So I tell you, forget green hydrogen for a long time, if ever. The government's renewable energy plans are a disaster everywhere you look. But the government's response today, use more of your money to underwrite a 5-fold increase in new wind and solar capacity and pumped hydro. All of it backed by the government too. It's your money at risk, subsidising green billionaires like Forrest and other green energy carpetbaggers.
We say to renewable energy developers, the minimum price you need guaranteed, the price over which you'll share your return, make a return to the government, to the taxpayer, and again they put in their bids and the best bids win. We need to get to 82% renewables.
And all of this to reach Labor's crazy promise to get to 82% renewables by 2030. All that extra money to reach a target that the government's own solicitors have now admitted in court will not change the climate anyway. Not in any ways you'd notice, because we're just too small. But how much money will this take just to do that? Bone today refused to say. Out of embarrassment, I reckon.
Can you level with the Australian public and tell us how much it will cost?
Well, it's an auction, PK. Now, when you're putting a house on the market, you don't issue a press release saying this is what we expect to get.
Couldn't even get that right. Someone should tell Bowen that people selling houses do actually announce a set reserve price and do tell buyers the estimated price range, okay? But Bowen will not tell you how many more billions of dollars of your money this government is now going to waste to reach targets that actually make no difference anyway. Well, no difference to anything but your power bills, which are going up, and your electricity system, which is facing blackouts. This is going to be disaster, even bigger than The Voice, driven once again by Labor ideologues and dreamers who are totally blind to reality. But to Barnaby Joyce, the Nationals frontbencher and former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby, great to see you, as we do on every Thursday. Look, this new push from the government to get lots more renewable energy targets, since its targets are all in trouble, it sounds to me a terrible, terrible mistake.
It's power alchemy, isn't it? I mean, it's just this mythology that somehow we can create in Australia what hasn't been created anywhere else in the world. There's not one country that runs on renewable energy the way where Australia wants to go. And when they try to do it, such as Germany, it falls flat in its face. Now let's look at what Mr. Bowen announced today. He's basically said we're going to go from 6 gigawatts to 32 gigawatts of underwritten by you, the taxpayer, foreign companies basically ripping you off on your power bills. What they will do is they'll say, okay, we can put in a bid, let's put in one. We demand a rate of return of 8%. And then I said, well, we can borrow the money at 4.5%, 8%. This is just money for jam. Well, how do you do that? Well, these fools walk up, and when a fool walks up, you've got to rip them off. And we're ripping off the Australian government, who get their money back from the Australian people, from you. And, if this is so affordable, Mr. Bowen, if it's so logical, why do you need to subsidise it? Shouldn't just the market take care of it, not pop up like mushrooms? But no, it's not working. It's a fiasco. It's a debacle, and it's hurting your listeners. If we don't have cheap energy, and we don't have cheap wages, and resources are at global prices, where's your competitive advantage? How can you grow the economy when it's just structurally deficient in one of its fundamental food stocks, which is energy? Look,
Barnaby, this is a total disaster, and it's just going to get worse. It's a tragedy to see all these extra billions now being promised. I'm going to talk more about this with Terry McCrann after you, but I want to go to a tweet from you that actually surprised me, Barnaby. Yesterday was the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, shot in the head as he drove in an open car. The man that was blamed, a communist sympathiser, Lee Harvey Oswald, was himself later shot dead by a gangster. And you tweeted that 65% of Americans don't believe the Warren report that this assassination was done only by Oswald with a dodgy ex-military Italian rifle firing from the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository 81 metres away, and at a moving target at that. And you said, nor do I. Why? What is your evidence?
Well, I suppose it's, we don't have the conclusive evidence. The Warren report, 800 pages. Do you know there was 13,000 pages to the report into Dungowan Dam? Now, when you take a person's head, I hate to say it so graphically, a person's head moving in a motor car, 81 metres away is a person with a Carano rifle. But but people have disparagingly say the safest place to be in a Carano rifle is in front of the barrel. So he managed to get 3 shots away and tragically a bullseye with a dodgy rifle and a miracle bullet. And the person who led the investigation, Dulles, he was actually sacked by Kennedy and led the investigation into the assassination of Kennedy. Kennedy had said he'd break up the influence of Cuba within the United States, basically the Cuban cohort, into 1,000 pieces. He had a reason to have a whole range of enemies. And it's just an I have a rifle, and I have rifles that are much better than a Carano. It probably came out around about 1900, 1910 it was built. And this is just, I believe, it's just beyond belief that this could have happened. And when you look at the ballistics of exactly what happened, it just throws so many questions there, and even
I
hearing
suspect
further reports.
we will never, ever get to the bottom of it. I tell you, this is a good time to plug someone that I like and whose hospitality I enjoyed when I was the ambassador to The Hague. Brett Mason has written a book that you might be interested in, the former senator, Saving Lieutenant Kennedy, how an Australian soldier in World War II led a group that saved him when he was in the water off the drink off Japanese controlled islands. Brilliant read. Brett Mason can tell a good story. But to a local problem, Barnaby, the good rains of the past couple of years, so much for global warming, has caused a rat plague in central Queensland that has now spread to northern Queensland. It's just so extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. It's so bad, there's actually a carpet of dead rats on the beach at Karumba on the Gulf of Carpentaria. They keep getting drowned by the rising tide. I think they go out to try and get shellfish or something. How serious is this?
Well, what happens with rats, of course, they get into your motor vehicle, they chew out your wiring, they chew out your air conditioner system, they chew through your gauze. They've obviously had a little bit of a problem with them in the past. They brought about bubonic plague. But putting that aside, they're just filth. And what you'll see is they get into your food, they'll climb into bed with kids. You don't want them. They're nasty bits of work.
Well, I don't know. We've lost sound there. But Barnaby, I don't know about that. But I tell you what, if anyone's got any more gas masks they can send up to the poor people of Karumba, I think they'll be gratefully accepted. Barnaby Joyce, congratulations on your wedding the other week. I'm glad you're back from your honeymoon. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. After the break, Terry McCrann and that hostage deal between Hamas and Israel is supposed to start, well, right now, this very hour, but it's hit a hurdle, or maybe there's a trick. And why Anthony Albanese's leadership has failed, a former top Labor official who worked with him, after this break.
A troubled young woman. Her evil parents.
We never had any issues between us.
Has justice been done?
I'm in a prison.
Join journalist Richard Gilliatt as he delves into one of Australia's most gripping cases. Shadow of Doubt, a new podcast investigation from The Australian.
I cannot find one of these allegations that's possible.
Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
There's something that the holidays and a good book have in common. It's the warmth. It's getting lost in a different world. Put simply, it's magic. Make this holiday season a story worth telling with Lit Joy. With classic stories like A Christmas Carol, with gorgeous custom covers and artwork, bookish stocking stuffers, and special editions for you and the book collectors in your life. Add some magic to your holidays with Lit Joy Crate. Go to litjoycrate.com and use code BOOK10 to get 10% off your first bookish purchase. litjoycrate.com.
Now we're going to come back to this renewable energies plan of the government today.